What if the most critical components in your car, your medicine, and your phone were all part of a hidden economic trap? For decades, the story we've been told about our relationship with China is one of cheap goods and endless consumer choice. But that story has a dark twist. The common belief was that trading with China was a win-win, but the reality is far more alarming. We didn't just get cheaper t-shirts, we walked into a state of codependency that we can't easily escape. The truth, hidden in 2 decades of policy and corporate decisions, is that your job, your wallet, and our entire national security are now on the line. In this video, we're going to uncover how this trap was set, why every attempt to escape has failed, and how China gained a chokehold on the very building blocks of the 21st century economy. So how did we get here? The story begins at the turn of the millennium. In 2001, China joined the World Trade Organization, a move championed by Western leaders with an incredibly appealing promise: 1 billion new consumers for American products and a flood of affordable goods for us. The popular theory was that economic integration would also nudge China toward becoming a more open, democratic partner. It was a grand bargain, and for a while it seemed to work. Store shelves filled with inexpensive electronics and clothes, while corporations saw profits soar by shifting manufacturing to China. But this wasn't a simple win-win. It was the beginning of a gradual rewiring of the global economy. The part most people misunderstand is that this wasn't a secret plot. It was a series of decisions by policymakers, by corporations chasing profits, and by consumers demanding lower prices that China strategically leveraged for its own long-term goals. The promise of a democratic partner faded, replaced by the reality of a strategic competitor who mastered the game we invited them to play. The first signs of trouble didn't appear in Washington, D.C., but in America's industrial heartland. The years following China's WTO entry unleashed what economists call the China shock. Research has shown that rising competition from Chinese imports was a major contributor to manufacturing job losses and disrupted local labor markets across the country. For millions, this wasn't an abstract theory. It was a factory closing, a stable job disappearing, and a local economy hollowing out. In exchange for cheaper televisions, entire communities saw their foundations crumble. The real cost was more insidious. As stable, middle-class jobs vanished, wages for many working-class Americans stagnated. This is the first layer of the trap. The American consumer grew accustomed to low prices, while the American worker paid with their job security and wage growth. We traded domestic industrial capacity for short-term affordability, creating a cycle where our consumption was fueled by the very system undermining our long-term economic security. For years, this system ran invisibly in the background. Then, the pandemic hit, and the illusion of a flawless global supply chain shattered. We faced critical shortages of masks, gloves, and other essential medical supplies. It was a brutal wake-up call, throwing a harsh spotlight on a key vulnerability. Just how many of our most important supply chains ran straight through China? This dependency goes far beyond PPE. It's structural. China is a major producer of active pharmaceutical ingredients, APIs, the core components needed to make a huge range of medicines. While not the sole source for all drugs, its significant role in producing key ingredients for things like antibiotics and painkillers gives it enormous potential leverage over global health. Then there are rare earth minerals, elements essential for all modern technology, from smartphones to fighter jets. While China mines a large portion of these, its true dominance lies in processing. Estimates suggest Beijing controls a staggering portion, in some cases around 90% of the global capacity for processing rare earths. This gives it a chokehold on the building blocks of the modern world. This isn't just about being the world's factory, it's about controlling the essential inputs to everyone else's factories. The political mood had soured. The language shifted from partner to threat, and the response was a trade war. The U.S. imposed massive tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars worth of Chinese goods. The logic seemed simple. Make Chinese products more expensive, and American companies will buy American. But this is where the trap snapped shut. Instead of a massive return of jobs, we got a backfire. Multiple studies found that the cost of these tariffs was largely passed on to American importers and ultimately to American consumers. The tariffs acted less like a penalty on China and more like a tax on American households and businesses. For small businesses, it meant higher costs. For families, it meant pricier goods. Meanwhile, China retaliated with precision, targeting American agricultural exports and causing direct pain to U.S. farmers. The trade war didn't just fail, it proved how painfully codependent we'd become. We were so deeply intertwined that trying to punch our rival meant punching ourselves in the face. Now, the new buzzword is de-risking, or the China Plus One strategy. The idea is to diversify supply chains by moving parts of manufacturing to countries like Vietnam, Mexico, or India. On the surface, it sounds like the perfect solution, but this strategy has a hidden flaw. What many companies are discovering is that escaping China's orbit is harder than it looks. Even when a company moves final assembly to Vietnam, it often finds its new factory is still sourcing many components and raw materials from China. We aren't just untangling a simple supply line, we're trying to exit a deeply integrated industrial ecosystem. China's unrivaled infrastructure, skilled workforce, and massive scale can't be replicated overnight. So while the label on the box might change from Made in China to Made in Vietnam, the guts of the product often still trace back to Beijing. For many industries, it's not a real escape. It's just rearranging the furniture inside the same trap. This complex web of jobs, prices, and power is reshaping our world in ways we're only beginning to understand. It's not just a news headline, it's a force that affects your financial future and our national security. If you want to keep getting ahead of the narratives and understand the powerful forces shaping your world, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell for notifications. We've journeyed from the hopeful optimism of the 2000s to the harsh reality of today. You've seen how the simple promise of cheap goods led us to outsource our industrial base,